In today's story, Officer Jack Turner's life changes after a single, life-altering mistake, wrongfully arresting Alicia Richards, a young girl who didn't fit his idea of belonging in a wealthy neighborhood. To make amends, Jack is sent to volunteer at a local youth center, where he meets Devin, a troubled teen on the edge, and Jasmine, a quiet artist with dreams of escaping her harsh reality. As Jack tries to guide them, he's forced to confront his own flaws and seek redemption. Will Jack be able to earn their trust and right his past wrongs? Follow his powerful journey of redemption and self-discovery. Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more moving stories like this one. Can true change happen after a mistake? Let us know what you think. It was late afternoon when Officer Jack Turner turned down Maple Grove Lane, the most prestigious street in Oak Ridge Heights. The houses here weren't just large. They were estates. Wide, manicured lawns stretched out in front of enormous mansions that looked like something out of a luxury magazine. Jack felt a certain pride patrolling this neighborhood. It was clean, peaceful, and free of the problems that plagued other parts of the city. He liked to think he had something to do with that. As he cruised slowly through the neighborhood in his squad car, Jack noticed a beat-up old sedan parked in front of one of the grand homes. The car looked wildly out of place in Oak Ridge Heights. Most of the residents here drove high-end vehicles, BMWs, Teslas, sleek black sedans, or luxury SUVs. This car, with its rusty exterior and faded paint job, was the kind of vehicle you'd expect to find in the lower-income parts of the city, not parked next to a mansion worth millions of dollars. His instincts kicked in, as they always did when something seemed off. Jack had been a cop for over 15 years, and he had honed a sharp sense for trouble. It was the little things that usually gave criminals away. Things like this. He narrowed his eyes as he pulled up behind the car, his gaze sweeping over the empty street. The houses in Oak Ridge Heights were well-spaced, hidden behind gates and tall hedges. It wasn't like the cramped streets of downtown where neighbors would be sitting on their stoops or watching from their windows. Here, privacy reigned, and that privacy sometimes gave cover to things that didn't belong. Jack cut the engine of his squad car and got out, his boots crunching against the smooth gravel of the driveway. He moved with purpose, his eyes locked on the suspicious vehicle. The air was quiet, the only sound coming from the faint rustle of trees swaying in the summer breeze. He approached the car slowly, his hand instinctively brushing the grip of his holstered gun as he drew nearer. It was a habit, one that had saved his life more than once. The windows of the sedan were tinted, making it difficult to see inside. Jack frowned. This didn't feel right. A quick look through the windows confirmed that no one was inside the car. He peered closer and noticed a jumble of personal items. Bags, clothes, empty fast food wrappers. Someone had clearly been living out of the vehicle, a stark contrast to the wealth on display all around it. His mind began to race. Was this car involved in a burglary? Was someone squatting inside one of the empty homes? The possibilities swirled in his head, each more suspicious than the last. Just as Jack was about to radio the station to report the vehicle, the front door of the mansion swung open, and a young black man stepped out, carrying a large cardboard box. Jack's entire body stiffened, his hand moving even closer to his holster. The man was in his 20s, wearing baggy jeans and a faded hoodie that looked as out of place as the car. Jack's eyes narrowed and suspicion flared in his chest. The man hadn't noticed Jack yet. He was focused on the box in his arms, carefully navigating the steps down from the front porch. Jack's mind was already leaping to conclusions. In his experience, people who looked like this man didn't belong in Oak Ridge Heights. The neighborhood was safe because people like him were kept out. Jack had spent his career making sure of that. He cleared his throat and stepped forward. "Excuse me," Jack called out, his voice carrying across the lawn. The man froze in place, startled, and turned toward Jack, his face immediately tense. "What are you doing here?" There was an edge to Jack's voice, an authority that demanded answers. The young man hesitated, shifting the box in his hands as if unsure whether to keep walking or stop. I'm just helping my aunt move," the man stammered, his eyes flicking nervously toward the house. "She lives here." Jack's suspicion deepened. The man's response felt rehearsed, too quick. He had seen this kind of thing before. Young guys with a story ready to explain why they were somewhere they didn't belong. "Helping your aunt? Jack repeated, his voice laced with doubt. Is that right? The man nodded quickly, his eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. Yeah, she's just inside, he said, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness. We're moving some stuff to her new place. Jack wasn't buying it. The story didn't sit right with him. Oak Ridge Heights wasn't the kind of neighborhood where people helped each other move. Wealthy families hired movers. Professionals, not family members in old sedans. Jack crossed his arms, his expression hardening. Can I see some ID? Jack asked, his tone sharp. The young man blinked, startled, as if he hadn't expected to be questioned. ID? He repeated, fumbling awkwardly with the box in his hands. Yeah, ID, Jack said, taking a step closer, his presence looming. You have a driver's license, right? I need to make sure you're who you say you are. The man set the box down carefully on the sidewalk and patted his pockets, his hands trembling slightly. Yeah, it's in my wallet, he mumbled, his voice shaky. Just give me a sec. But Jack was already making up his mind. The man was too nervous, too shifty. The whole situation felt wrong, and Jack's instincts, honed over years of patrolling, screamed that something was off. He had dealt with enough suspects to know when someone was lying. This kid was up to something. He just hadn't figured out what yet. As the man fumbled for his wallet, Jack's hand inched closer to his handcuffs, his mind racing with the possibilities. Was this car involved in a robbery? Was this guy stealing from one of the houses? Jack could almost feel the satisfaction of stopping a crime before it happened, of catching the perpetrator in the act. He had been doing this job for so long that everything felt like a threat, like something that needed to be controlled. Listen, Jack said, his voice cold and authoritative. I'm going to need you to put that box down and keep your hands where I can see them. The young man's face paled, and for a split second, Jack saw fear flash across his features. The man dropped his wallet, which fell to the ground with a dull thud. I didn't do anything wrong, he said, his voice rising with panic. My aunt's inside. She can vouch for me, I swear. But Jack wasn't listening. He had already decided the man was guilty. His entire career was built on the idea that certain people, certain types, didn't belong in neighborhoods like this. His job was to keep Oak Ridge Heights safe, and that meant keeping people like this young man out. Before the man could say another word, Jack reached for his handcuffs, the cold metal glinting in the fading sunlight. Turn around, Jack ordered. You're coming with me until we figure this out. The man's eyes widened in shock. No, wait, he cried, raising his hands in a desperate plea. Please, just talk to my aunt. She's inside. I didn't do anything. Jack stepped forward, but before he could place the handcuffs on the man, the front door of the mansion swung open again, and an older woman appeared. Her eyes darted between Jack and the young man, a look of confusion and concern spreading across her face. Devin? The woman called out, her voice uncertain. What's going on? The young man, Devin, turned to her, relief flooding his features. Aunt Marie, tell him I'm helping you move, he exclaimed. He thinks I'm doing something wrong. Jack froze, his hand still hovering over the cuffs. The woman, Marie, frowned and walked down the steps toward them. Officer, she said, her tone firm but polite, Devin is my nephew. He's helping me move a few boxes today. For a moment, Jack didn't know what to say. He had been so sure, so certain that Devin didn't belong here. But now, standing in front of this wealthy woman, who clearly recognized the young man, Jack felt a cold wave of embarrassment wash over him. Marie gave Jack a long, hard look before turning to Devin. Thank you, Devin, she said quietly. You can take that box inside. Devin shot one last look at Jack before grabbing the box and heading back toward the house. Jack stood there, frozen in place, his stomach twisting with a mixture of anger and shame. He had been wrong, dead wrong, but the sting of his mistake wasn't something he could easily shake off. As Marie disappeared back into the house with her nephew, Jack retreated to his squad car, the weight of the encounter pressing heavily on his shoulders. His mind raced as he replayed the scene over and over again, each time feeling a deeper sense of guilt creep in. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had made a mistake that could have cost an innocent man his dignity. But he pushed the guilt down, buried it beneath years of training and instinct. He had been doing his job, he told himself, protecting Oak Ridge Heights. That was what mattered. Still, as Jack climbed back into his patrol car and drove away, He couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone horribly wrong. Jack tried to shake off the uncomfortable feeling as he continued his patrol through Oak Ridge Heights. He couldn't afford to dwell on it. He had a job to do, and lingering on a single interaction would only distract him. Still, his mind kept circling back to Devin's fearful expression, the way his voice had trembled as he tried to explain himself. Jack turned down another street, his eyes scanning the manicured lawns and pristine driveways. It was nearing dusk, and the long shadows cast by the tall trees lining the street gave the neighborhood an almost eerie calm. He had always loved patrolling here in the evening, the peace of the wealthy enclave a far cry from the chaos of downtown. But today, something about it felt different. He couldn't pinpoint why, but the air felt heavier, like something was looming just beyond his sight. As he rounded a corner, Jack noticed a figure walking down the sidewalk on the opposite side of the street. A young black girl, no older than 12, was walking alone, her backpack slung over her shoulder. Her steps were slow and uncertain, and she kept glancing down at her phone, as if unsure of where she was going. Jack frowned. Kids didn't usually walk alone in Oak Ridge Heights. The families here were too protective. Chauffeurs, nannies, or parents usually escorted their children wherever they went. This girl didn't fit that image. His mind immediately jumped to the same thoughts that had plagued him earlier. Did she belong here? Was she up to something? He couldn't ignore the nagging feeling. Something wasn't right. Jack slowed his squad car and pulled up next to the girl. As he rolled down his window, the girl looked up, startled, her eyes wide with fear. She clutched her phone tightly in her hand, as if it were a lifeline. "What are you doing here?" Jack asked, his voice sharp and direct. The girl blinked, clearly caught off guard by the question. I'm just walking home," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was at my friend's house, but I think I got lost." Jack's brow furrowed. "Lost? Where are you coming from?" The girl swallowed hard, glancing down at her phone again. "My friend Emma's house," she said, her voice trembling. "But I can't remember which street to turn on." Jack studied her, suspicion rising in his chest. A lost little girl in Oak Ridge Heights didn't seem right. His instincts, the same instincts that had driven his every decision for years, told him there was more to the story. The same instincts that had misled him just moments earlier with Devin. He stepped out of the car and approached the girl, towering over her. "Let me see some ID," he said, his voice taking on a harder edge. The girl's lower lip quivered, and she shook her head. "I don't have any," she whispered. "I'm only 12. Jack felt a surge of frustration. This didn't make sense. He knew most of the families in Oak Ridge Heights, at least by sight, and he had never seen this girl before. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "What's your name?" Jack demanded, his patience wearing thin. The girl's eyes welled with tears, and she hugged her phone tighter to her chest. "My name is Harriet Richards," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I live on Maple Street." Jack's stomach twisted. Maple Street was one of the wealthiest sections of Oak Ridge Heights. The idea that this girl could be from one of those mansions didn't fit with the image he had in his mind. He knew the families on Maple Street, or at least he thought he did. "Who's your father?" Jack asked, his tone laced with suspicion. "My dad is William Richards," Harriet said, her voice trembling. "He's the CEO of—" Jack cut her off, shaking his head. "Don't lie to me," he snapped. "I know every family in this neighborhood, and there are no Richards living here." Tears spilled down Harriet's cheeks, and she let out a soft sob. "Please," she whispered. "I'm telling the truth. I'm just trying to get home." Jack's frustration boiled over. He had given her enough chances to explain herself, and now he was done listening. He reached for his handcuffs, the weight of the cold metal of familiar comfort. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," he ordered. Harriet gasped, her face pale with fear. "No!" she cried, taking a step back. "Please! I didn't do anything wrong." Jack didn't hesitate. He grabbed her wrist, his grip firm as he pulled her toward him. "You're coming with me to the station until we figure out what's going on," he said, his voice flat. The girl's sobs grew louder, but Jack ignored them. His mind was made up. He had a job to do, and this was just another part of it. The station was bustling with the usual evening activity when Jack arrived with Harriet. The girl's face was streaked with tears and her shoulders were hunched, as if she were trying to make herself smaller. Jack walked her inside, barely acknowledging the stares from his fellow officers as he led her to the front desk. "Name?" the desk sergeant asked, barely looking up from his computer. Jack stood beside Harriet, his voice clipped. "Harriet Richards," he said. "Found her wandering in Oak Ridge Heights without ID." The sergeant raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment. He typed the name into the system while Jack stood there, his mind still racing with the day's events. The truth hadn't sunk in yet. He still felt justified in his actions, convinced he had done the right thing. Oak Ridge Heights was a place he had spent years protecting, and he couldn't let his guard down. Not when it came to the people who didn't belong. But then, the front doors of the station flew open, and the atmosphere shifted in an instant. "Where is she?" a booming voice demanded, echoing through the room. Heads turned as a tall, imposing man strode inside, his eyes blazing with fury. Jack's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the man. Samuel Richards, the CEO of one of the city's largest companies and a prominent donor to the police department. He was also Harriet's father. Jack's blood ran cold. The full weight of his mistake hit him like a ton of bricks. He had arrested the daughter of Samuel Richards. "Where is my daughter?" Samuel repeated, his voice full of rage. Jack froze, his mouth dry. He had seen Samuel Richards on the news, read about him in business journals, but had never interacted with him personally. Now the man was storming toward him, his face contorted with anger. I didn't realize," Jack stammered, feeling the heat of shame creep up his neck. "I didn't know she was your daughter." Samuel ignored him, pushing past to kneel in front of Harriet. The girl let out a choked sob and threw her arms around her father's neck. "Daddy," she cried, her voice muffled against his suit jacket. "I was so scared." Samuel hugged her tightly before standing, his furious gaze locking onto Jack. "You arrested my daughter for walking home in her own neighborhood?" he spat, his voice dripping with venom. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Jack swallowed hard, his mind reeling. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The shame that had been creeping in now surged over him like a tidal wave. He misjudged the situation completely, and now the consequences are crashing down on him. "Mr. Richards," a voice called out, and Jack turned to see Lieutenant Frank Mason walking toward them, his expression grim. "Let's take this to my office. We can sort everything out there." Samuel didn't move. "I don't need an office," he said coldly. "I need to know why your officer treated my daughter like a criminal." The entire station seemed to hold its breath as the tension grew. Jack's fellow officers exchanged uneasy glances, clearly aware of how serious the situation had become. Jack felt frozen in place, unable to move or speak. "I'm sorry, Mr. Richards," Jack finally managed to say, his voice weak. You thought what?" Samuel interrupted, his voice sharp. "You saw a black child in a wealthy neighborhood and assumed she didn't belong. That's what you thought." Jack flinched at the accusation, but he couldn't deny it. He had made assumptions, acted on instinct without questioning those instincts, and now he was paying the price. Mason stepped between them, his tone firm but measured. "Mr. Richards, I understand your anger," he said, "but please, let's discuss this in private. We'll get to the bottom of this." Samuel shot one last furious glance at Jack before nodding reluctantly. "Fine," he muttered, "but I'm not letting this go." As Samuel led Harriet toward Mason's office, Jack stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He had made a terrible mistake, one that could cost him everything. The next morning, Jack found himself sitting in Lieutenant Mason's office, his stomach churning with dread. The fallout from his arrest of Harriet Richards had been swift. Samuel Richards had made his fury known, and now the entire department was scrambling to do damage control. Jack's career hung in the balance, and he knew it. Mason sat across from him, his expression unreadable. "Jack," he began, his voice low and steady. "You messed up." Jack nodded, unable to argue. "I know," he muttered, staring down at his hands. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this." Mason sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Intent doesn't matter, Jack. What matters is the outcome. You arrested the daughter of one of our biggest donors, without cause." Jack's chest tightened. "You thought wrong," Mason interrupted, his voice hard. "You let your biases cloud your judgment, and now we're all paying the price." Jack winced, feeling the full weight of Mason's disappointment. He had known Mason for years, had respected him as a leader. Now he felt like a child being scolded. The good news is, Samuel Richards isn't looking to destroy your career, Mason continued. At least not yet. He's offered an alternative. Jack frowned, confused. An alternative? Mason nodded. Samuel runs a youth center for underprivileged kids. He wants you to volunteer there for 6 months. It's either that or face a full investigation, and you know what that would mean. Jack's heart sank. Volunteering at a youth center? He had never worked with kids, and certainly not in that kind of environment. It felt like a punishment, a way to humble him for what he had done. But at the same time, Jack knew he didn't have a choice. I'll do it, Jack said quietly, though the words tasted bitter on his tongue. Mason nodded. Good. You start tomorrow. Don't screw this up. Jack Turner stood outside the Oakland Hope Initiative, the youth center Samuel Richards had insisted he volunteer at. The center was located on the outskirts of downtown, in a neighborhood that couldn't have been more different from Oak Ridge Heights. Here the streets were narrow, lined with aging buildings that had seen better days. Graffiti covered some of the walls and the sidewalks were cracked and uneven. A group of teenagers loitered near the corner, their eyes tracking Jack warily as he stepped out of his car. The center itself was a small, unassuming building, painted in cheerful yellows and blues, its bright exterior clashing with the grittier surroundings. Jack could hear the faint sound of children laughing inside. But as he stood on the sidewalk, a wave of apprehension washed over him. This wasn't his world. He had spent his entire career patrolling affluent neighborhoods, and now he was being thrown into a community that saw police officers not as protectors, but as enforcers, sometimes enemies. He knew that all too well. Jack took a deep breath and walked toward the entrance, his steps heavy. The sign above the door read, Building Futures, One Child at a Time. And there was a banner advertising a summer program. He hadn't prepared himself for this. It had been years since he'd worked directly with kids. His world had always been one of rules, structure, and maintaining order. This place seemed chaotic, a world where flexibility, compassion, and understanding were the keys to success. As he stepped through the front doors, Jack was immediately hit by the noise. Children were running around, some playing basketball on the small indoor court, others working on crafts at tables scattered throughout the main room. The energy was palpable, young lives bursting with possibility, a stark contrast to the tense, rigid atmosphere Jack was used to in the police station. "Can I help you?" a sharp voice called out. Jack turned to see a woman walking toward him. She was tall and fit, with short, curly hair and a stern expression. Her hands were on her hips as she approached him, her eyes narrowing as she took in his appearance. Jack's police uniform had been replaced by a plain button-up shirt and jeans, but the authority he had carried for so long was still evident in the way he held himself. "I'm Officer Jack Turner," he said, offering a hand. "I'm here to volunteer." The woman didn't shake his hand. Instead, she crossed her arms over her chest, her expression unreadable. "I know who you are," she said bluntly. "I'm Monica Sanders, the director here." Jack swallowed, feeling the weight of her judgment before she even said another word. Monica had probably heard about his arrest of Harriet Richards, and it was clear from her demeanor that she wasn't impressed. "Samuel Richards told me you'd be coming," she continued, her tone cold. "But let's get one thing straight. You're not here to play cop. You're here to help these kids." Jack nodded stiffly. "I understand," he said, though he wasn't sure he fully did. What did helping these kids even mean? His instincts told him that structure, discipline, and order were the best ways to keep people in line, but this place seemed to thrive on something entirely different. Monica's eyes narrowed. "Do you?" she asked, clearly skeptical. "Because the last thing we need is someone who sees these kids as problems to be solved. They've had enough of that from the world." Jack opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything, a group of kids ran past them, laughing loudly as they chased each other around the room. One of the boys glanced back at Jack, his eyes flicking nervously to the badge clipped to Jack's belt before quickly looking away. Monica sighed, clearly frustrated. "Follow me," she said, turning on her heel and walking toward the back of the room. Jack followed her, his unease growing with each step. She led him into a small office that overlooked the main area of the center. From the window, Jack could see more kids arriving, some being dropped off by tired-looking parents, others arriving on their own. The room itself was cluttered with paperwork, old event posters, and photos of kids from various activities over the years. Monica sat behind her desk and gestured for Jack to sit in the chair opposite her. "Look," she said, her tone softening just slightly. "I know you didn't ask for this, but neither did we. The only reason you're here is because Samuel Richards pulled some strings. But while you're here, you need to understand that this place isn't like the world you're used to." Jack nodded, though he wasn't sure what she was getting at. "I'm here to help," he repeated, feeling like it was the only thing he could say. Monica leaned forward, her eyes searching his face. "Helping here means listening, not controlling," she said. "These kids aren't just troubled. They're dealing with stuff most adults can't handle. Poverty, violence, systemic racism. They need people who see them for who they are, not just what they've been through." Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I'm not here to judge them," he said, though even as the words left his mouth, he felt the weight of his own bias. The truth was, he had spent his career judging people, assessing threats, and acting on his instincts. And those instincts had failed him when he arrested Harriet. Monica didn't look convinced. "Good," she said flatly, "because they'll know if you are." The conversation left Jack feeling uneasy. He wasn't used to being in a position where he wasn't in control. Out on the streets, his authority was never questioned. He knew the rules and people followed them. But here, the rules seemed different, and the kids looked at him with eyes that weren't filled with trust, but with suspicion. He knew he had to earn their respect, but he wasn't sure how. Jack's first few days at the youth center were a blur of confusion and frustration. He spent most of his time standing on the sidelines, watching the kids go about their activities. But there was an invisible wall between him and them. They didn't trust him, and he could feel the weight of their judgment whenever he tried to interact. It was like they were waiting for him to mess up. The problem was, Jack didn't know how to connect with them. Every time he tried to initiate a conversation, he was met with silence or wary glances. They were polite enough but distant, as if they were testing him, seeing if he would prove to be just another cop who didn't get it. It wasn't just the kids who kept their distance. Monica and the rest of the staff weren't exactly welcoming either. Jack could tell they were watching him closely, waiting for him to slip up, to show that he didn't belong here. He was a stranger in their world, and they made sure he knew it. One afternoon, Jack was assigned to help supervise a group of kids working on a mural in the courtyard. The mural, which stretched across one side of the building, depicted scenes from the neighborhood, a mix of bright colors and images that reflected the community. Some of the kids were painting, while others sat in the shade talking and laughing. Jack tried to engage with them, but every time he asked a question or offered to help, he was met with cold indifference. One of the older boys, Devin, shot him a look of disdain every time he came near. Devin was about 17, tall and athletic, with a scowl that seemed permanently etched on his face. Jack had heard his name mentioned by the other staff members, and it was clear that Devin was one of the kids they were most concerned about. "Nice work," Jack said, trying to make conversation as Devin worked on the mural. Devin didn't look up. "Whatever," he muttered, his voice flat. Jack stood there awkwardly for a moment, unsure of what to say next. He had never been good at small talk, especially not with teenagers. In his world, conversations were about orders, instructions, and keeping things under control. But here, the kids didn't care about that. After a long silence, Devin finally glanced at Jack, his expression hard. "Why are you even here?" he asked bluntly. Jack was caught off guard by question. "I'm here to help out," he said, though the words felt hollow. Devin snorted, clearly unimpressed. "Right," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because you care so much about us, right?" Jack frowned, feeling his defenses rise. "I do care," he said, his tone sharper than he intended. "I wouldn't be here if I didn't." Devin stopped painting and turned to face him, his eyes narrowing. "You don't care about us," he said. "You're just here because you messed up and got yourself into trouble. Don't act like you're some kind of hero." The words stung, mostly because they were true. Jack hadn't chosen to be here. He had been forced into this position because of his own mistakes. But hearing it laid out so bluntly made him realize how far he had to go. I'm not trying to be a hero, Jack said, his voice quieter now. I just want to help. Devin scoffed. Yeah, well, we don't need your help. We've got enough people telling us what to do. Jack didn't know how to respond to that. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but he knew it wouldn't make a difference. Devin wasn't interested in hearing what he had to say. The rest of the afternoon passed in silence, with Jack standing awkwardly on the edge of the group while the kids worked. Every now and then, he would catch someone glancing at him, their eyes full of distrust. It was a feeling he wasn't used to, and it gnawed at him. Later that evening, Jack sat in his car in the parking lot, his mind racing. The first few days at the center had been a disaster. He had tried to connect with the kids, but nothing seemed to work. They saw him as an outsider, someone who didn't understand their world, and he wasn't sure if he ever would. He thought back to his career as a cop, to the years he had spent patrolling Oak Ridge Heights. There, everything had been so clear, so black and white. He had been in control, enforcing the law, and keeping the peace. But here, in this neighborhood, things were different. The lines weren't so clear. The kids didn't need someone to control them. They needed someone to understand them. But Jack wasn't sure if he was capable of that. He had spent so long seeing the world in terms of right and wrong, good and bad, that he didn't know how to operate in the gray areas. As the sun set over the city, casting long shadows across the parking lot, Jack realized that if he was going to make any progress here, he had to change the way he saw things. He couldn't rely on the instincts that had served him for so long. He had to listen, to learn, and to let go of control he had clung to for years. But letting go of that control was easier said than done. A few more days passed, and Jack's frustration only grew. No matter how hard he tried, the kids still kept their distance. He had watched Monica interact with them, how she seemed to know exactly what to say, to break through their tough exteriors. She could make them laugh, make them feel heard, and it was clear that they trusted her. Jack couldn't help but feel a pang of envy. He had spent his career as the person people looked to for leadership, but here, in this world, he was just another adult they didn't trust. One afternoon, Jack was assigned to supervise a group of kids playing basketball in the courtyard. The sun beat down on them, and the kids were sweating as they ran up and down the cracked asphalt, shooting hoops and shouting at each other. It was a simple game, but there was competitive energy in the air, and Jack could feel the tension building. As he watched, he noticed that Devin was playing, his tall frame moving with ease as he dribbled the ball down the court. Devin was good, really good. He had a natural athleticism that Jack hadn't noticed before, and he seemed to dominate the game, weaving in and out of the other kids with practiced skill. The game was intense, and as the minutes passed, Jack could sense that something was brewing. One of the other boys, a stocky kid named Jamal, was getting frustrated with Devin's control of the game. Every time Devin scored, Jamal's scowl deepened, and it wasn't long before the tension between them came to a head. Devin went for a layup, but Jamal shoved him hard, sending Devin stumbling backward. The ball bounced out of bounds and Devin straightened up, his face contorted with anger. "Hey, what the hell, man?" Devin snapped, stepping toward Jamal. "You think you're so damn good, don't you?" Jamal shot back, his voice thick with frustration. "You're always hogging the ball." The argument escalated quickly, with both boys squaring off, their voices rising. Jack could see where this was going. He had broken up enough fights in his career to recognize the signs. His first instinct was to jump in, to break them apart and assert control over the situation. But something stopped him. Instead of rushing in, Jack took a deep breath and approached slowly. "Hey guys," he said, keeping his voice calm but firm. "What's going on?" Both boys turned to him, their expressions tense. Devin's fists were clenched at his sides, his body coiled with anger, while Jamal's chest was heaving with frustration. "He's always hogging the ball," Jamal muttered, glaring at Devin, "like he's better than everyone." Devin's eyes flashed with anger. "I'm just playing the game," he shot back. "If you can't keep up, that's not my problem." Jack stepped between them, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Okay, let's take a step back," he said. "No one needs to get hurt over a game, right?" The boys hesitated, but neither of them moved. Jack could feel the tension in the air, the familiar edge of a confrontation waiting to happen. But instead of stepping in as the enforcer, he tried something different. Devin, Jack said, turning to face him, you're a great player, but sometimes it's not just about winning. It's about making sure everyone on your team feels like they're part of the game. Can you do that? Devin looked at him, his expression hard. For a moment, Jack thought he had said the wrong thing, that Devin was going to ignore him and start the fight anyway. But then slowly, Devin's shoulders relaxed, and he took a step back. Fine, he muttered. Whatever. Jamal's scowl softened slightly, and he let out a heavy breath. Yeah, okay, he said, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Jack let out a silent sigh of relief. It wasn't much, but it was progress. He had de-escalated the situation without resorting to force or authority, and for the first time, he felt like he was starting to understand how things worked here. The rest of the game continued without incident, and Jack stayed on the sidelines, watching as the kids played. It wasn't until the game was over that Devin approached him, his expression guarded but less hostile than before. You play? Devin asked, nodding toward basketball. Jack shrugged. Not in a while, Devin smirked. Bet I could take you. Jack chuckled, feeling a flicker of amusement. Maybe you could, he said. But I'd give you a run for your money. Devin didn't respond, but there was a faint glimmer of respect in his eyes that hadn't been there before. It wasn't much, but it was something. As Jack left the center that evening, he felt a small sense of accomplishment. It wasn't the breakthrough he had been hoping for, but it was a step in the right direction. And for the first time since he started at the center, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference here. Jack arrived at the center the next morning, feeling more optimistic than he had in days. His small victory with Devin on the basketball court had given him a new perspective, one that he was determined to build on. He realized that his old approach, the one he had relied on for years as a cop, wasn't going to work here. The kids didn't need someone to tell them what to do. They needed someone to listen to. As Jack walked into the center, he noticed a group of kids gathered around one of the tables, working on a project. He recognized Jasmine, one of the younger girls at the center, sitting quietly at the edge of the group. Jasmine was about 11, with wide, curious eyes and a shy demeanor. She had been one of the kids who had avoided him the most since he started, always keeping her distance whenever he tried to engage with her. Jack approached the table slowly, careful not to intrude too abruptly. What are you guys working on? He asked, his tone casual. One of the boys looked up and shrugged. Just some art stuff, he said, waving a hand at the pile of supplies scattered across the table. Jack nodded, glancing at Jasmine, who was focused intently on the paper in front of her. She was sketching something, her small hands moving delicately as she added details to her drawing. Jack hesitated for a moment before speaking. That's really good, he said, nodding toward her drawing. Jasmine glanced up at him briefly, her expression unreadable, before returning to her work without a word. Jack felt a pang of frustration. He had been hoping for some kind of response, but Jasmine seemed determined to keep him at arm's length. He took a deep breath and sat down at the edge of the table, careful not to get too close. What are you drawing? He asked, keeping his tone light. Jasmine's eyes flicked up to him again, and for a moment, Jack thought she was going to ignore him. But then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she answered. It's a butterfly, she said, her hand still moving across the paper. Jack smiled, feeling a small sense of victory. It's beautiful, he said. I used to draw when I was a kid. I wasn't nearly as good as you are, though. Jasmine didn't respond, but Jack could see the slightest hint of a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. He knew it wasn't much, but it was something. For the rest of the afternoon, Jack stayed near the table, watching the kids work on their projects. He didn't push Jasmine to talk more, but he made sure to give her quiet encouragement whenever he could. Slowly, he felt the wall between them start to come down. As the day wore on, Jack found himself thinking more about what Monica had said to him during his first meeting at the center. Helping these kids wasn't about control. It was about listening, about seeing them for who they were. Jack had spent his career enforcing rules, maintaining order, and keeping people in line. But here at the center, the kids didn't need that. They needed someone to understand them, to give them the space to express themselves without judgment. Later that evening, as Jack sat in his car outside the center, he thought about the changes he needed to make, not just in how he interacted with the kids, but in how he saw the world. For so long, he had viewed everything through the lens of authority and control. But now he was starting to realize that there were other ways to make a difference. He didn't have all the answers, and he knew the road ahead would be difficult. But for the first time, Jack felt like he was on the right path. The heat of summer clung to the air as Jack Turner walked into the Oakland Hope Initiative one early afternoon, greeted by the usual buzz of activity. The bright laughter of children playing basketball outside filtered through the open doors, and the soft chatter of younger kids working on arts and crafts echoed through the hallway. It had been several weeks since Jack had started volunteering at the center, and though things were far from perfect, he was starting to feel a sense of belonging. But today, something fell off. Monica was waiting for him by the front desk, her face tight with worry. She waved him over as soon as he stepped inside. Jack's instincts flared, and his pace quickened. "What's going on?" he asked as soon as he reached her. Monica sighed, crossing her arms. "There's been an issue," she said. "It's about Devin. He's been getting into some trouble outside the center. Nothing serious yet, but the staff's concerned." Jack's stomach tightened. Devin had been a challenge from the beginning, but over the past few weeks, Jack had started to see glimpses of potential in him. They had even shared a few brief, civil conversations after the basketball game. Jack had been cautiously optimistic that maybe Devin was warming up to him, but the look on Monica's face suggested something else. "What kind of trouble?" Jack asked, bracing himself for the answer. Monica sighed, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "He's been hanging out with some older guys from the neighborhood. You know the type, always around the edges but not directly involved in anything illegal. At least not that we can prove. But we know they're bad news." Jack clenched his jaw. He had seen it before. Kids getting pulled into dangerous circles, sometimes out of necessity, sometimes because it was the only way they felt they belonged. Devin had always carried a chip on his shoulder, and Jack knew that if the wrong people got in his ear, it could be a fast track to a future that wasn't bright. "Where is he now?" Jack asked. Monica gestured toward the courtyard where a group of kids was gathered. "He's out there, but I don't think he'll listen to you, Jack. He's defensive. We've tried talking to him before, but he just shuts down." Jack frowned, feeling the weight of Monica's words. He had built some rapport with Devin, but it was fragile, and any wrong move could push the kid further away. The old Jack, the cop who relied on authority and power to maintain order, would have confronted Devin head-on. But that wasn't the answer here. Devin didn't need another lecture or warning. He needed someone to understand where he was coming from. And Jack wasn't sure if he could be that person. Still, Jack knew he had to try. "I'll talk to him," Jack said, his voice steady but laced with uncertainty. Monica gave him a sympathetic look. "Just be careful. He's been through a lot." Jack nodded, but the weight of the situation pressed down on him as he made his way toward the courtyard. He knew this was more than just a conversation. This was the first real test of everything he had learned since coming to the center. And if he failed, Devin might slip through the cracks for good. Jack found Devin sitting on a bench at the edge of the basketball court, his body language closed off and tense. He was hunched over, staring at his phone, but it was clear from the way he clenched his fists that something was eating at him. The other kids kept their distance, sensing the storm brewing just beneath the surface. "Devin," Jack called out as he approached, keeping his tone calm and casual. "Got a minute?" Devin looked up, his expression guarded. He didn't say anything, just shrugged and turned his attention back to his phone. Jack took that as an invitation and sat down on the bench beside him, leaving a respectful distance between them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Jack wasn't sure where to begin. He had spent years in situations like this, interrogating suspects, de-escalating conflicts. But this felt different. Devin wasn't a criminal or a suspect. He was just a kid trying to navigate a world that was often stacked against him. "So," Jack started slowly, "I hear you've been hanging out with some new people." Devin's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Jack pressed on, choosing his words carefully. "I get it. Sometimes it feels like the people you've been hanging out with aren't enough, or maybe they don't understand what you're dealing with. So you look for people who do." Devin glanced at him out of the corner of his eye, but still didn't say anything. Jack took a deep breath. "But the thing is, Devin, those people, they're not always looking out for you. They'll tell you what you want to hear, make you feel like you belong. But at the end of the day, they're not going to be the ones who have your back when things get rough. Devin finally looked at him, his eyes hard. You don't know anything about me, he muttered, his voice thick with anger. You don't know what it's like. Jack didn't flinch. He knew this would be the hardest part, getting through the wall that Devin had built around himself. Maybe I don't, Jack admitted, but I've seen enough to know that it doesn't end well when you follow the wrong crowd. You've got potential, Devin. Real potential. You don't need to throw that away because some older guys tell you you're one of them. Devin's fist clenched again, but this time there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. You don't get it, he muttered. You don't know what it's like to be stuck here. Jack could hear the frustration, the hopelessness in Devin's voice, and for the first time, he felt like he was seeing the real kid beneath the tough exterior. Jack nodded, leaning forward slightly. You're right, Devin. I don't know what it's like to live here every day, but I know you've got a choice right now. You can choose to let these guys drag you down, or you can choose to take control of your future. Devin stared at the ground, his expression conflicted. Jack could see the internal battle raging within him, the desire to be more than what the world expected of him, and the pull of the streets, of the people who offered him an escape, even if it was temporary. I can't change things for you, Devin, Jack said quietly, but I can help. So can Monica and the rest of the people at this center. You just have to let us. For a long time, Devin didn't say anything. The silence stretched between them, heavy and tense. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing with doubts. Had he said the right thing? Was Devin even listening? Finally, Devin let out a long breath and stood up, his body still tense, but his expression a little less guarded. I don't need your help, he muttered, though his voice lacked the conviction it had before. Jack nodded, standing up as well. Maybe not today, he said, but if you ever do, I'll be here. Devin didn't respond. He shoved his hands in his pockets and walked away, leaving Jack standing by the basketball court, unsure if he had made any difference at all. The tension between Jack and Devin lingered for days. Jack hadn't been sure whether their conversation had gotten through to Devin or if the kid had just brushed him off as another adult trying to tell him what to do. But Jack didn't press. He knew that pushing too hard would only make things worse, so he waited. Meanwhile, Jack threw himself into his work at the center, trying to connect with the other kids, build trust, and prove that he was there for them, not just out of obligation, but because he genuinely cared. Slowly, he began to see small changes in how the kids treated him. They weren't exactly warming up to him, but the cold distance was starting to melt. It was Jasmine, the quiet girl with the butterfly drawings, who was the first to truly open up to Jack. One afternoon, as Jack sat in the courtyard watching the kids play, Jasmine approached him with one of her drawings in hand. She handed it to him without saying a word, and when Jack looked at it, he saw a small, delicate butterfly perched on the edge of a cracked sidewalk. Jack smiled, touched by the gesture. This is beautiful, he said, meeting Jasmine's eyes. Thank you for sharing it with me. Jasmine gave a small, shy smile before turning to leave, but Jack stopped her. Hey, Jasmine, he called softly. Can I ask you something? She turned back, her expression curious but wary. Why butterflies? Jack asked. You always draw them. What do they mean to you? Jasmine hesitated, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt before answering. They're free, she said quietly. They can go anywhere they want. No one tells them where they can't go. Jack nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words. That makes sense, he said gently. Do you ever feel like you can't go where you want? Jasmine shrugged, but Jack could see the sadness in her eyes. Sometimes, she whispered, but that's just how it is. Jack's heart ached for her. He knew that feeling all too well, the feeling of being trapped, stuck in a world that didn't always make sense. But he also knew that Jasmine, like Devin, had the potential to break free from that cycle, to create a life for herself that wasn't defined by the limitations placed on her by society. He wanted to help her see that, but he knew it wasn't something that could be rushed or forced. Trust had to be earned, and that took time. You know, Jack said softly, looking at the drawing again, just because things feel that way now doesn't mean they'll always stay the same. Butterflies don't start off free. They have to go through a lot to get there. Jasmine tilted her head, her brows furrowing. Like what? They start as caterpillars, Jack explained, his voice gentle, and it takes time for them to grow and change. But when they do, they're strong enough to break out of their cocoon and fly. It's not easy, but they get there. Jasmine nodded slowly, as if she was processing his words. Jack didn't push her for more. Instead, he handed the drawing back to her with a warm smile. Keep drawing, Jasmine, he said. You're good at it. She took the drawing and looked at him for a moment, something like gratitude flickering in her eyes before she turned and walked away. Jack watched her go, feeling the familiar mixture of hope and uncertainty. He had made a connection, but whether it would be enough to make a real difference, only time would tell. A few weeks later, Jack was faced with a situation that threatened to undo all the progress he had made. It was late in the afternoon, and the center was winding down for the day. Kids were gathering their things, saying their goodbyes to staff, and heading home. Jack was in the main office, going over some paperwork with Monica, when one of the staff members, Jessica, burst into the room, her face pale with worry. Jack, she said urgently, it's Devin. He's in trouble. Jack's heart dropped into his stomach. He stood up so fast that his chair scraped loudly against the floor. What happened? He demanded. Jessica shook her head, her voice shaky. I don't know all the details, but one of the kids said they saw him outside with some older guys. They were arguing about something, and it didn't look good. They're near the corner store on Jefferson Street. Jack felt the blood drain from his face. He knew that part of the neighborhood. It was notorious for gang activity and petty crime. If Devin was caught up in something there, it could spiral out of control fast. I'll handle it, Jack said, grabbing his jacket and heading for the door. Monica stood up, her expression grim. Be careful, Jack, she warned. This could get ugly. Jack nodded, but he didn't slow down. As he left the center and headed for his car, his mind raced. He had tried to reach Devin, tried to show him that he had other options, but it seemed like it hadn't been enough. And now Jack might be too late. He drove through the streets with his heart pounding in his chest, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the neighborhood, and Jack felt a sense of urgency creeping up his spine. He had seen too many kids fall into the wrong crowd, and he wasn't going to let that happen to Devin. Not if he could help it. When Jack pulled up to the corner of Jefferson Street, he saw the scene unfolding before him. Devin was standing near the entrance of the corner store, his face twisted in anger. 3 older guys surrounded him, their postures aggressive, their voices loud. Jack couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could tell from their body language that it wasn't a friendly conversation. Jack parked the car and got out, trying to keep his movements calm and measured. He didn't want to escalate the situation, but he knew he had to act fast. As he approached, one of the older guys, Raymond, a known troublemaker in the area, turned and spotted him. Raymond sneered. Well, 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 he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Look who decided to show up. Devin's head snapped toward Jack, and for a moment Jack saw a flicker of fear in the boy's eyes. But it was quickly replaced by anger, and Devin stepped forward, his fist clenched. Stay out of this, Turner, he growled. This ain't your business. Jack's heart sank. Devin was in deeper than he had thought. The tension in the air was thick, and Jack knew that one wrong move could lead to violence. He had to find a way to defuse the situation without pushing Devin further away. Devin, Jack said, keeping his voice calm, I'm not here to make trouble. I just want to talk. Raymond laughed, stepping in front of Devin. Nah, man, he doesn't want to talk. We're handling this. Jack's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to stay cool. He had to focus on Devin, not the others. Devin, listen to me, Jack continued, ignoring Raymond. You don't need to do this. Whatever these guys are offering you, it's not worth it. Devin's face twisted with frustration. You don't get it, he snapped. You think you can just show up and fix everything? But you can't. I'm not some project you can save, Turner. Jack felt the sting of Devin's words, but he didn't back down. I'm not trying to save you, Devin, he said quietly. But I don't want to see you throw your life away for people who don't care about you. Raymond scoffed, stepping closer to Jack. You really think you can take him away from us? he asked, his voice low and threatening. You think he's better off with you? Jack met Raymond's gaze, his body tense but controlled. I'm not here to take anything, he said, his voice steady, but I'm not going to let you drag him down with you. Raymond's sneer widened. That's so? Before Jack could respond, Devon exploded. Shut up, Raymond, he yelled, stepping between them. Just shut the hell up. Jack's heart raced as he watched the conflict play out. Devon was torn, caught between two worlds, the world of the streets that promised belonging and the world of the center that offered him a way out. Jack could see the pain in Devon's eyes, the struggle between wanting to prove himself and wanting to escape the cycle of violence and chaos. Raymond, clearly annoyed by Devon's outburst, shoved him hard in the chest. Don't talk to me like that, kid, he growled. You're nothing without us. Devon stumbled back, and Jack's pulse quickened. He knew he had to act fast before the situation spiraled into something worse. Devon, let's go, Jack said, his voice firm but not forceful. You don't owe these guys anything. Devon's gaze flicked between Jack and Raymond, his face a mask of confusion and anger. For a moment it seemed like he was going to stay, that the pull of the streets would win. But then something shifted in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, of understanding. Devon took a deep breath and stepped back from Raymond. I'm done, he muttered, his voice shaky but determined. Raymond's face darkened, and for a split second, Jack thought he was going to attack. But instead, Raymond sneered and backed away, shaking his head. You'll regret this, kid, he said coldly. You think you can walk away, but you'll come crawling back. Jack's body tensed as Raymond and his crew walked away, disappearing into the shadows. He kept his gaze on them until he was sure they were gone. Then he turned to Devon, who was standing there, his shoulders slumped, his face pale. You did the right thing, Jack said softly, stepping closer. Devon didn't respond right away. He just stood there staring at the ground, his fists still clenched at his sides. After a long moment, he finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can do this. Jack placed a hand on his shoulder, offering a gentle squeeze. You don't have to do it alone, he said. We've got your back, Devon. For the first time, Devon looked up, and Jack saw the fear and uncertainty in his eyes. But there was also something else, something that hadn't been there before. Hope. The weeks following Devon's confrontation with Raymond were a turning point, not just for Devon, but for Jack as well. Slowly but surely, Devon started to spend more time at the center, engaging with the activities, talking to the staff, and, most importantly, building relationships that didn't revolve around fear or control. Jack could see the change in Devon, the way he began to relax, the way his guard came down bit by bit. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments where Devon slipped back into old habits, but the progress was undeniable. One afternoon, after a long day of activities, Devon approached Jack with a hesitant look on his face. Jack was cleaning up the arts and crafts table when Devon cleared his throat, catching Jack's attention. Hey, Devon mumbled, his hands shoved into his pockets. Can I talk to you for a second? Jack straightened up, surprised by the request but willing to listen. Sure, he said, nodding toward the courtyard. Let's take a walk. They stepped outside into the warm afternoon air, the sounds of the city humming in the distance. Jack waited patiently, giving Devon the space to speak when he was ready. After a few moments of silence, Devon finally spoke, his voice low and unsure. I've been thinking, he began, about everything that happened. With Raymond, with you, with all of it. Jack nodded, sensing that this conversation was important. He stayed quiet, letting Devon find his own words. I don't want to end up like them, Devon admitted, his tone raw with vulnerability. I thought they had my back, but I can see now. They don't care. They don't give a damn about me. Jack's chest tightened. He had been waiting for this moment, for Devon to realize the truth on his own terms. I'm glad you see that, Jack said gently. You deserve better. Devon let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. I don't know if I'm good enough for anything better. Jack stopped walking and turned to face Devon, his expression serious. Don't ever say that. You're more than good enough. You just need to believe it. Devon looked away, his jaw clenched. It's hard, man. When everyone expects you to fail, it's hard not to live up to it. Jack felt a pang of sympathy. He knew what it was like to carry the weight of expectations, whether they were your own or someone else's. It doesn't matter what anyone else expects, Jack said firmly. What matters is what you expect from yourself. Devin didn't respond right away, but Jack could see the wheels turning in his mind. He was processing everything, trying to make sense of a world that had always felt stacked against him. Jack knew it would take time, but he also knew that Devin had it in him to rise above the circumstances that had threatened to drag him down. I don't know what my future looks like, Devin said quietly, but I think I want it to be different. Jack smiled, feeling a swell of pride. That's the first step, he said, and you're already on your way. Devin nodded, his expression softening. Thanks, Turner, he muttered, for everything. Jack patted him on the back, his heart full. Anytime, kid. As they walked back to the center, Jack felt a sense of peace settle over him. Devin's journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt, but the path forward was clear, and Jack knew he would be there to help Devin every step of the way. As Jack's relationship with Devin continued to grow, so did his connection with the rest of the kids at the center. Jasmine, in particular, had begun to open up to him more, showing him her drawings and even sharing bits and pieces of her thoughts on life. Jack had come to care deeply for the kids, seeing them not as cases to be solved, but as individuals with their own hopes, fears, and dreams. But as much as Jack was making progress with the kids, he knew there was still one piece of his journey left unresolved: his relationship with Alicia Richards. Since the day Jack had arrested her, the memory of their encounter had haunted him. He had never had the chance to truly apologize, to face the consequences of his actions head on. And now, after everything he had learned at the center, Jack knew it was time. One morning after his shift at the center, Jack made his way to the Richards home. It was a quiet Saturday, and the sprawling estate of Samuel Richards looked just as pristine and intimidating as it had the day Jack had made the biggest mistake of his career. His stomach churned with nerves, but he forced himself to continue. This conversation wasn't just for Alicia, it was for himself too. When Jack rang the doorbell, it was Samuel Richards who answered. The man's sharp, calculating eyes locked onto Jack, and for a moment Jack wondered if Samuel was going to slam the door in his face. But instead, Samuel stepped aside, allowing Jack to enter. "Alicia's in the garden," Samuel said curtly, his tone giving nothing away. "You can speak to her there." Jack nodded, grateful for the opportunity, even though he could tell that Samuel was still wary of him. He followed Samuel's instructions and made his way through the house, eventually stepping out into the lush garden in the backyard. Alicia was sitting on a bench by the fountain, her back turned to him as she sketched something in her notebook. Jack felt a lump form in his throat. This was the moment he had been dreading, and yet it was the moment he needed. "Ms. Richards?" Jack called softly, stepping forward. Alicia turned, her expression unreadable as she took in the sight of him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Jack could feel the weight of her gaze, the unspoken tension hanging between them. Finally, Jack took a deep breath and spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm so sorry for what I did to you that day. I judged you unfairly, and I let my own biases cloud my judgment. I can't take back what I did, but I need you to know that I've spent every day since then trying to make it right." Alicia didn't respond right away. She simply stared at him, her face calm but guarded. Jack couldn't tell what she was thinking, and the silence stretched on, making his heart race. "I'm not the same person I was back then," Jack continued, his voice quiet but firm. "I've been working with the kids at the center, trying to learn, trying to change, and I want you to know that you're the reason for that. You opened my eyes to the damage I was doing, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." Alicia's expression softened just slightly, and she let out a long breath. "I've heard about what you've been doing at the center," she said, her voice measured. "Devin talks about you sometimes." Jack blinked, surprised. "Devin?" Alicia nodded. "He said you've helped him a lot, that you're different from the other cops." Jack felt a lump rise in his throat. He hadn't realized that his work at the center had made its way back to Alicia. "I'm trying to be," he said quietly. I know I still have a long way to go, but I'm committed to doing better." For a moment, Alicia said nothing, and Jack's heart pounded in his chest. But then slowly she nodded. "I can see that," she said softly, "and I forgive you." Jack's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't expected forgiveness, not after everything he had done. But hearing those words from Alicia, the girl he had wrongfully arrested, felt like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "Thank you," Jack whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." Alicia gave him a small, sad smile. "Just keep doing the work, Jack. That's what matters." Jack nodded, his heart full. As he left the Richards estate, he felt a sense of closure that he hadn't known he needed. He had faced his past, apologized for his mistakes, and earned the forgiveness he had been seeking for so long. But more than that, Jack had found something he hadn't expected. He had found hope. Hope that change was possible, that redemption was within reach, and that no matter how far he had fallen, there was always a way back. In the months that followed, Jack's life at the Oakland Hope Initiative became more than just an obligation. It became his purpose. He continued to work with the kids, helping them navigate their own challenges while learning more about himself in the process. Devin made steady progress, eventually applying for a scholarship through one of the center's programs. And Jasmine continued to share her drawings with Jack, each one more hopeful and vibrant than the last. Jack's relationship with Monica deepened as well. The initial tension between them faded, replaced by mutual respect and understanding. Jack had proven that he was willing to learn, to grow, and to change, and in doing so, he had earned the trust of both the staff and the kids. But Jack knew his journey wasn't over. The road to redemption was long, and there would always be more to learn, more to atone for. The mistakes of his past still lingered in his mind, but they no longer defined him. He had found a new path, one built on empathy, compassion, and the belief that everyone, himself included, deserved a second chance. One afternoon, as Jack watched the kids play in the courtyard, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. This place, this community, had become his home. He wasn't just a cop trying to make amends anymore. He was part of something bigger. He was part of a family. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the center, Jack smiled. His journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. Because now Jack Turner knew that redemption wasn't about perfection, it was about progress, and he was ready to keep moving forward, one step at a time. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the center, Jack smiled. His journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. Because now Jack Turner knew that redemption wasn't about perfection, it was about progress, and he was ready to keep moving forward, one step at a time. If you've enjoyed Jack's journey of redemption and growth, don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more powerful stories like this. Join us as we continue to explore stories of second chances, hope, and change. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Subscribe now and be part of the journey.